Chapter 16. Opposites Attract. Shiva had never seen flames so high near the Mansarovar lake. The howling winds, the open space, the might of the Gunas, his tribe, simply didn't allow any fire to last too long. He looked around. His village was deserted, not a soul in sight. The flames were licking at the walls of his hamlet. He turned towards the lake. Holy lake, where are my people? Have the Prakritis taken them hostage? Shiva, help me! Shiva turned around to find a bloodied Brahaspati racing out of the village gates through the massive inferno. He was being followed by a giant hooded figure, his sword drawn, his gait menacing in its extreme control. Shiva pulled Brahaspati behind him, drew his sword and waited for the hooded Naga to come closer. When within shouting distance, Shiva screamed, "You will never get him, not as long as I live." The Naga's mask seemed to develop a life of its own. It smirked. "I already got him." Shiva spun around. There were 3 massive snakes behind him. One was dragging Brahaspati's limp body away, punctured by numerous massive bites. The other 2 stood guard, spewing fire from their mouths, preventing Shiva from moving closer. Shiva watched in helpless rage as they dragged Brahaspati towards the Naga. A furious Shiva turned towards the Naga. "Lord Rudra, be merciful," whispered Shiva. A severely bloodied Drapaku was kneeling next to the Naga, defeated, forlorn, waiting to be killed. Next to Drapaku, down on her knees, was a woman. Streaks of blood ran down her arms. Her billowing hair covered her downcast face. And then the wind cleared. She looked up. It was her, the woman he couldn't save, the woman he hadn't saved, the woman he hadn't even attempted to save. "Help! Please help me!" "Don't you dare!" screamed Shiva, pointing menacingly at the Naga. The Naga calmly raised his sword and without a second's hesitation beheaded the woman. Shiva woke up in cold sweat, his brow burning again. He looked around the darkness of his small tent, hearing the soft sounds of the Madhumati lapping the shores. He looked at his hand. The serpent Om bracelet was in it. He cursed out loud, threw the bracelet onto the ground, and lay back on the bed. His head felt heavy, very heavy. The Madhumati flowed quietly that night. Parshuram looked up. The moonlight gave just enough visibility for him to do his task. He checked the temperature of the flat girdle heating up on the small fire. Scalding. It had to be. The flesh would have to be seared shut quickly, otherwise the bleeding would not stop. He went back to sharpening the axe. He tested the sharpness of the blade once again. Razor sharp. It would afford a clean strike. He looked back. There was nobody there. He threw away his cloak and took a deep breath. "Lord Rudra, give me strength." He curled up his left hand, the sinning hand that had dared to murder the Nilkant's favorite. He held the outcrop of a tree stump, held it tight, giving himself purchase to pull his shoulder back. The trunk had been used earlier to behead many of his enemies. The blood of those unfortunate victims had left deep red marks on the wood. Now his blood would mix with theirs. He reached out with his right hand and picked up the battle axe, raising it high. Parshuram looked up one last time and took a deep breath. "Forgive me, my lord," The battle axe hummed through the air as it swung down sharply. It sliced through perfectly, cutting the hand clean. "How in the name of the holy lake did he escape?" shouted Shiva. "What were you doing?" Parvateshwar and Bhagirath were looking down. The Lord had justifiable reasons to be angry. They were in his tent. It was the last hour of the first prahar. The sun had just risen, and with that had come to light Parshuram's disappearance. Shiva was distracted by commotion outside. He rushed out to find Divodas and a few other soldiers pointing their sword at Parshuram. He was staggering towards Shiva, staring at him, nobody else. Shiva held his left hand out, telling his men to let Parshuram through. For some reason, he didn't feel the need to reach for his sword. Parshuram had his cloak wrapped tightly around himself. Bhagirath stepped up to check Parshuram for weapons, but Shiva called out loudly, "It's all right. Bhagirath, let him come." Parshuram stumbled towards Shiva, obviously weak, eyes drooping. There was a massive blood stain on his cloak. Shiva narrowed his eyes. Parshuram collapsed on his knees in front of Shiva. "Where had you gone?" Parshuram looked up, his eyes melancholic. "I? Penance, my lord." Shiva frowned. The bandit dropped his cloak and with his right hand placed his severed left one at Shiva's feet. "This hand sinned, my lord, forgive me." Shiva gasped in horror. Parshuram collapsed, unconscious. Ayurvati had tended to Parshuram's wound. She had cauterized it once again in order to prevent any chance of infection. Juice of neem leaves had been rubbed into the open flesh. A dressing of neem leaves had been created and would tie it around the severed arm. She looked up at Shiva. "This fool is lucky. The axe was sharp and clean. The blood loss and infection from a wound like this can be fatal." "I don't think the cleanliness or sharpness was an accident," whispered Bhagirath. "He made it so. He knew what he was doing." Parvateshwar continued to stare at Parshuram, stunned. Who is this man? Shiva had not uttered a word so far. He just kept looking at Parshuram, his face devoid of any expression. His eyes narrowed hard. "What do we do with him, my lord?" asked Parvateshwar. "We use him," suggested Bhagirath. "Our ship will take up to 6 months to repair. We can't stay here for that long. I say we carry Parshuram in one of our cutters to the closest Branga outpost and hand him over. We will use the leverage of handing over the most wanted criminal in Branga to wrangle a ship from them. They'll force the medicine out of him, and we get a path to the Nagas." Shiva didn't say anything. He continued to stare at Parshuram. Parvateshwar didn't like Bhagirath's solution, but he also knew it was the most practical thing to do. He looked at Shiva. "My lord?" "We are not handing him over to the Brangas," said Shiva. "My lord!" cried Bhagirath, shocked. Shiva looked at Bhagirath. "We are not." "But my lord, how do we get to the Nagas? We have sworn to get the medicine to the Brangas." "Parshuram will give us the medicines. I'll ask him when he is conscious." "But my lord," continued Bhagirath, "he is a criminal. He will not help unless he is coerced. I admit he has made a sacrifice, but we need a ship to get out of here." "I know." Bhagirath continued to stare at Shiva. Then he turned towards Parvateshwar. The Meluhan general gestured to the Ayodhyan prince to be quiet. But Bhagirath would have none of it. What the Nilkant was suggesting was not practical. Please forgive me for saying it again, my lord, but the only practical way to get a ship is by letting the Brangas get their hands on him. And that's not the only reason to do so. Parshuram is a criminal, a mass murderer. Why shouldn't we surrender him to suffer the righteous Branga justice? Because I said so. Saying this, Shiva walked out. Bhagirath kept staring at Parvateshwar, not saying a word. Parshuram's eyes opened slightly. He smiled faintly, and then went back to sleep. As the second prahar came to a close, the sun shone brightly right overhead. The Branga and Kashi soldiers had been hard at work, with Vishwadhumna having taken charge. Kavas didn't seem to mind following orders from the capable Branga. The Branga travelling doctor had tended to all the wounded. They were all on the road to recovery. The dead had been cremated in the Ichhawar village ground. While nobody expected the few remaining lionesses and the liger to return back to the village, for abundant precaution the soldier had dug ditches around the village. Temporary quarters had been erected for both Branga as well as Kashi soldiers in the school building. The villagers had been commandeered to arrange the food and supplies. The villagers, though rejoicing at the decimation of the pride, stayed warily at a distance, carrying out the tasks assigned to them by Vishwadhumna. Their mortal fear of the Nagas, despite the fact that their lives had just been saved by them, kept them suppressed. The cleaners' children, however, seemed to delight in playing with Kali. They pulled her hair, jumped on her, and laughed uproariously every time she pretended to get angry. "Children," spoke their mother sternly. They turned around and ran towards her, holding on to her dhoti. The cleaner's wife spoke to Kali. "My apologies for this, Your Highness. They will not disturb you." In the presence of an adult, Kali's demeanor became serious once again. She merely nodded wordlessly. She turned to her right to find Ganesh sleeping with his head on Sati's lap, his face a picture of bliss. His wound had been dressed. The doctor was especially worried about the mutilation caused by the lioness on Ganesh's leg. It had been cleaned and bandaged tight. Sati looked up at Kali and smiled. She held her sister's hand. Kali smiled softly. "I have never seen him sleep so peacefully." Sati smiled and lovingly ran her hand along Ganesh's face. "I must thank you for taking care of him for so long." "It was my duty." "Yes, but not everyone honors their duty. Thank you." "Actually, it was my pleasure as well." Sati smiled. "I can't imagine how tough life must have been for you. I will make it up to you, I promise." Kali frowned slightly, but kept quiet. Sati looked up once again as a thought struck her. "You had said something about father. Are you sure? He's weak, but he loves his family dearly. I can't imagine him consciously hurting any of us." Kali's face hardened. Suddenly, they were disturbed by a noise from Ganesh. Sati looked down at her son. Ganesh was pouting. "I'm hungry." Sati raised her eyebrows and burst out laughing. She kissed Ganesh gently on his forehead. "Let me see what I can rustle up." As Sati walked away, Kali turned to Ganesh, about to scold him for his behavior, but Ganesh himself was up in a flash. "You will not tell her, Mausi." "What?" asked Kali. "You will not tell her. She is not stupid, you know. She will figure it out." That she may, but she will not find out from you. She deserves the truth. Why shouldn't she know? Because some truths can only cause pain, Mossy. They are best left unsaid. My lord, whispered Parshuram. Shiva, Parvateshwar and Bhagirath were huddled together around him in the tiny tent. It was the last hour of the third prahar. The sun was sinking into the horizon, turning the sludgy Madhumati waters orange-brown. Divodas and his team had already started working on repairing the ship. It was a daunting task. "What is it, Parshuram?" asked Shiva. "Why did you want to meet me?" Parshuram closed his eyes, gathering strength. "I will have one of my people give the secrets of the Naga medicine to the Brangas, my lord. We will help them. We will take them to Mount Mahendra in Kaling, from where we get the stabilizing agent for the medicine." Shiva smiled. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me, my lord. This is what you want. Doing your bidding is my honor." Shiva nodded. "You also need a ship," said Parshuram. Bhagirath perked up. "I have a large ship of my own," said Parshuram before turning to Parvateshwar. "Give me some of your men, brave general. I will tell them where it is. They can sail it here and we can leave." A surprised Parvateshwar smiled, looking at Shiva. Shiva nodded. The bandit looked tired. Shiva bent down, touching Parshuram on his shoulder. "You need to rest. We can talk later." "One more thing, my lord," said Parshuram, insistent. "The Brangas are only a conduit." Shiva frowned. "Your ultimate goal is to find the Naga." Shiva narrowed his eyes. "I know where they live," said Parshuram. Shiva's eyes widened in surprise. "I know my way through the Dandak forest, my lord," continued Parshuram. "I know where the Naga city is. I will tell you how to get there." Shiva patted Parshuram's shoulder. "Thank you. But I have one condition, my lord." Shiva frowned. "Take me with you," whispered Parshuram. Shiva raised his eyebrows, surprised. "But why?" "Following you is my life's duty. Please let me give my wretched life at least a little bit of meaning." Shiva nodded. "It will be my honor to travel with you, Parshuram." It had been 3 days since the Battle of Madhumati. Parvateshwar's men had located Parshuram's ship. It was even bigger than the one they had travelled in. Clearly a Branga ship. It even had hull extension to allow passage through the gates of Branga. The ship must have been captured by Parshuram's men from one of the unfortunate Branga Kshatriya bands sent to arrest or kill him. All the soldiers had boarded the ship. Parshuram's men were not prisoners anymore. They had been allotted comfortable quarters of the same order as the Suryavanshi soldiers who had beaten them. Shiva had personally seen to the comfort of both Purvaka and Parshuram. Ayurvati had stationed her assistant Mastrak alongside Parshuram, who was still extremely weak from tremendous blood loss. The ship was sailing comfortably up the Madhumati. When they would reach the Branga river, a fast cutter with one of Parshuram's men would be sent to guide King Chandraketu in finding the alternative source of the Naga medicine. The man would also inform the rest of Shiva's men at Brangaridaya to leave immediately and rejoin the brigade at the point where the Madhumati broke away from the Branga. The brigade would then sail back to Kashi. Shiva was desperate to meet Sati and Kartik. He had been missing his family. After that, he planned to raise an army and quickly turned south to find the Nagas. Shiva was standing at the lead of the ship, smoking some marijuana with Veerbhadra. Nandi stood next to them. They stared into the swirling waters of the Madhumati. "This expedition went better than expected, my lord," said Nandi. "That it had," smiled Shiva, pointing at the chilam. "Unfortunately, the celebration isn't quite up to the mark." Veerbhadra smiled. "Let me get to Kashi. They really know how to roll good grass there." Shiva laughed aloud. So did Nandi. Shiva offered the chilam to Nandi, but the Meluhan major declined. Shiva shrugged and took another drag before passing the chilam back to Veerbhadra. Shiva was distracted as he saw Parvateshwar come up to them, hesitate, and turn back. "I wonder what he wants to talk about now," asked Shiva, frowning. "It's obvious, isn't it?" smiled Veerbhadra. Nandi looked down and smiled, not saying a word. "Why don't you two idiots excuse me for a minute?" smiled Shiva as he walked away from his friends. Parvateshwar was standing at a distance, deep in thought. "General? A word, General?" Parvateshwar immediately turned around and saluted. "Your command, my lord." "Not a command, Parvateshwar, just a request." Parvateshwar frowned. "In the name of the holy lake," said Shiva, "for once listen to your heart." "My lord?" "You know what I'm saying. She loves you, you love her. What else is there to think about?" Parvateshwar turned beet red. "Has it been that obvious?" "Obvious to everyone, General." "But my lord, this is wrong." "How? Why? You think Lord Ram purposely designed laws for you to be unhappy?" "But my grandfather's vow, you have honored it for long enough, trust me. Even he would want you to stop now." Parvateshwar looked down, not saying anything. "I remember hearing that one of Lord Ram's commandments was that laws are not important. What is important is justice. If the purpose of justice is served by breaking a law, then break it." "Lord Ram said that?" asked Parvateshwar, surprised. "I'm sure he must have," smiled Shiva. "He never wants his followers to be unhappy. You are not hurting anyone else by being with Anandamai. You are not hurting the protest begun by your grandfather. You have served the purpose quite enough. Now let your heart serve another purpose." "Are you sure, my lord?" "I have never been surer of anything else in my life. In the name of Lord Ram, go to her." Shiva slapped Parvateshwar hard on his back. Parvateshwar had been thinking about this for long. Shiva's words only helped him gather his dwindling courage. He saluted Shiva and turned, a man on a mission, ready to take the plunge. Anandamai was leaning against the railing astern of the ship, enjoying the strong evening breeze. "Your Highness." Anandamai spun around, surprised to find Parvateshwar there, looking sheepish. "I meant Anandamai," whispered Parvateshwar. Anandamai stood up in surprise. "Yes, General? You wanted something?" asked Anandamai, her heart racing. Anandamai, I was thinking." "Yes?" "Well, it's like this. It's about what we were talking about." Anandamai was aglow, smiling from deep within her heart. "Yes, General?" I have never thought I would face this day, so, Anandamai nodded, keeping quiet, letting him take his time. She could figure out exactly what Parvateshwar wanted to say, but she also knew that it would be very difficult for the Meluhan general. My vows and Suryavanshi laws have been the bedrock of my life, said Parvateshwar, unquestionable and unchanging. My destiny, the destination of my life, and my role in it, has so far been clearly defined. This predictability is comforting, rather had been comforting for many decades. Anandamai nodded, silent. But, said Parvateshwar, the last few years have turned my world upside down. First came the Lord, a living man that I could look up to, a person beyond the laws. I thought this would be the biggest change my simple heart had been forced to handle. Anandamai continued to nod, trying her best not to frown or laugh, touched to see this proud man baring his heart to what she thought was one of the most wooden attempts at courtship in history. But she was wise enough to know that her Parva had to say his piece, or he would never be comfortable with himself or in the life she hoped he was choosing to make with her. But then, most unexpectedly, I also found a woman that I could look up to, could admire and adore. I have reached a crossroads in my life where my destination is a blur. I do not know where my life is going. The road ahead is unclear, but to my surprise, I find that I am happy with that. Happy as long as you can walk the road with me. Anandamai remained silent, smiling, tears in her eyes. He had really pulled it together at the end. It will be one hell of a great journey. Anandamai lunged forward and kissed Parvateshwar hard. A deep, passionate kiss. Parvateshwar stood stunned, taking in a pleasure he hadn't ever imagined. After what seemed like a lifetime, Anandamai stepped back, her eyes a seductive half-stare. Parvateshwar staggered, his mouth half open, not even sure how to react. Lord Ram be merciful, the general whispered. Anandamai stepped closer to Parvateshwar, running her hand across his face. You have no idea what you have been missing. Parvateshwar just continued to stare at her, dumbfounded. Anandamai held Parvateshwar's hand and pulled him away. Come with me. It had been a week since the battle with the liger. The few surviving lionesses and the liger had not come back. They were still licking their wounds. The villagers of Ichhawar were using the moments of peace to start tilling their lands, preparing for the seasonal crops. It was a time of unexpected joy and relief. The Chandravanshi soldiers were recovering. Ganesh's wounds were too deep. He still limped from the severe mauling his leg had taken, but he knew it was only a matter of time before he would be all right. He had to start preparing for the inevitable. Ma, whispered Ganesh. Sati looked at Ganesh, covering the dish she was cooking with a plate. She had spent the previous week listening to Kali share stories of Ganesh's childhood, sharing in his joys and sorrows, understanding her child's personality and character right down to his favorite dishes, and she was satiating his stomach and soul with what she had learned. What is it, my son? Kali had just stepped up close as requested by Ganesh. I think we have to start preparing to leave. I should be strong enough to travel in another week. I know. The food I have been giving you has some rejuvenating herbs. They are giving you strength. Ganesh knelt and held his mother's hand. I know. Sati patted her son's face lightly. Ganesh took a deep breath. I know you cannot come to Panchavati. It will pollute you. I will come to visit you regularly in Kashi. I will come in secret. What are you talking about? I have also sworn the Kashi soldiers to an oath of silence, on pain of a gruesome death, grinned Ganesh. They're terrified of us Nagas. They will not dare break the oath. The secret of my relation with you will not be revealed. Ganesh, what in Lord Ram's name are you talking about? I will not embarrass you. Your acceptance of me is enough for my soul. How can you embarrass me? You are my pride and joy. Ma, smiled Ganesh. Sati held her son's face. You are not going anywhere. Ganesh frowned. You are staying with me. Ma, said Ganesh, horrified. What? How can I? What will your society say? I don't care. But your husband, he's your father, said Sati firmly. Speak of him with respect. I meant no disrespect, Ma, but he will not accept me. You know that. I am a Naga. You are my son. You are his son. He will accept you. You don't know the size of your father's heart. The entire world can live in it. But Sati, said Kali, trying to intervene. No arguments, Kali, said Sati. Both of you are coming to Kashi. We travel when you are strong enough to do so. Kali stared at Sati, at a loss for words. You are my sister. I don't care what society says. If they accept me, they will accept you. If they reject you, I'll leave this society too. Kali smiled slightly, teary-eyed. I was very wrong about you, Didi. It was the first time Kali had called Sati her elder sister. Sati smiled and embraced Kali.